That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about episode 5 of Mary and George, The Golden City, which the series will begin to air on April 5th, 2024 on Starz.
So what's going on this episode? The year is 1618.
Mm-hmm.
The main storyline is Sir Walter Raleigh,
played by Joseph Mall.
He led troops or initiated a conflict in South America that upset Spain, and
yes, with the Spanish outpost, and he had been told not to do that. There's a whole history behind that this series does not really go into.
No, it does not. The only thing the series makes clear is that Sir Walter Raleigh and King James have a contentious relationship.
Yes, and Sir Walter Raleigh had been locked up in the Tower of London for treason against James I after he succeeded the throne from Elizabeth I, because under Elizabeth I, Raleigh was a hero and helped defeat the Spanish Armada.
So why is this important? For a few reasons. So Mary is telling George that he needs to be more involved in the king's official affairs, to be sort of like his support. So we get a moment where George sort of intrudes on a meeting, even though the king told him to sit his ass down somewhere else. And at first the king's kind of mad, but then he goes okay, you seem to do well, so why don't you join my privy council? And then at the first meeting we see George in, that's when they bring in Sir Walter Raleigh to basically explain himself. And George steps out of bounds and basically tells Sir Walter Raleigh, oh, you're fine.
You're fine, and you're going to go back to South America to putter around to look for El Dorado again.
Yeah. And also Sir Walter Raleigh's son, his only son, died during that initial conflict. So it's kind of like an emotional thing. So King James is upset because George sort of spoke out of turn and did the opposite of what the king would have done. However, it's important to know that the king's queen, she basically worships Sir Walter Raleigh. She studies his writings. Also, the public seems to favor Sir Walter Raleigh. He's a symbol of freedom.
Well, he's also English, and we have to remember that we have a Scottish king ruling both nations. So
ultimately, the public is happy with the decision that was made with Sir Walter Raleigh. So it's kind of good for George on that end, but the king is still mad at him. So George decides to tell the king, because his mother is you need. Also, Mary had been talking to the queen, and if we remember from episode 2, I believe, the queen had asked Mary, do you have your son under control? And she said, yes, of course. So Mary goes to George saying, you need to make sure that Sir Walter Raleigh is freed, because that's what the queen wants. But then, at the last minute, George sort of consoles the king and says, you should do what you want to do. Forget what we're all telling you. And what does the king decide to do? Execute Sir Walter Raleigh. So,
Count Gondomar of Spain, who's the one that came to report what Raleigh had done, him and Francis Bacon take George to one of Sir Walter Raleigh's public storytelling hours to see that he's a warmonger.
Yeah. So basically, George is being pulled away from his mother's
bosom.
And yeah.
At long last.
But the queen, of course, is inconsolable. She's so upset. She tells Mary, get out of here.
She's also dying.
And she's dying too. She's like Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. But
or even Julianne Moore in The End of the Affair.
Oh, God. So, of course, Mary goes to George mad. And he basically tells her, F off. Okay. So that's going on. What else is going on? The opening of the episode, Mary's husband, Sir Thomas, he is sick of this lady and her family. They're doing a family portrait, and he is just so disgusted with them.
Well, at first because everybody knows she's tipped to become a countess, And he's like, are you going to share your title with me? And she's like, no. Did you forget that when I married you, I said I didn't want any of your money and you didn't want to share any of it with me? And then the conversation goes downhill swiftly.
Well, because she says, like, he says, God, now I know what it feels like to be a woman. And
she's like, how's that? They dog shit.
Yeah. So he's mad.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells her, if I see any of y'all on my property, I'm going to shoot to kill. So their marriage is on the outs. And then we do see King James make Mary the Countess of Buckingham. Mm-hmm. So now she's feeling real good about herself. We also see that Frances, so Lady Hatton's daughter, who was forced to marry John, mm-hmm. Mary's lame son, she's having extramarital affairs because John cannot perform his husbandly duties.
I doubt, even if he could, I doubt that she was a woman that would
want that.
But yeah.
So at first, Mary's threatening her, but it seems like Mary's girlfriend, the prostitute, seems to side with Frances.
Mm-hmm.
Like she feels sympathetic towards her.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out Frances is pregnant from one of these men she's been sleeping with.
Mm-hmm.
So the prostitute helps her have an abortion.
With a magic potion.
With, some sort of nuts and berries.
Could we know what that potion is now?
Ugh.
Please?
So that's happening, unfortunately. But yeah, and then finally, the king's son, who also seems kind of special.
Charles does succeed his dad.
He does?
On the throne. Only 7 years after this episode is set. I want to know when King James starts to get all gouty and lose those teeth.
Yeah, because he still looks good.
He's pretty.
Although by the end of midway through the episode, he's lying on the ground because he says his back hurts. So I don't know if this is the beginning of the gout.
I don't know. He had more wrong than that.
Or his liver or kidney problems. But yeah, I don't know. I'm getting tired of Mary.
Well, she cannot. I think when we were talking after this episode, it's just there is no respite. That it is. It's like a chess game, and everybody that nobody's being human.
I think that's what I'm. Now that we've finished episode 5, it's starting to get to me. Like none of these people seem like human beings. Where's the joy? Even Mary telling George because the other plot point we didn't mention is Mary wants George to marry this rich girl.
Oh, yes. Catherine Manners.
And George is like, I don't like why. She's like, well, her dad is super rich and the dowry is going to be out of control. And like, we need this money for the family. And George says like we already have now. And she's like, well, I want more like everyone else has.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. When she said that, I just thought like, gosh.
Well, I mean,
where do you get joy from? Your husband hates you, like your kids hate you.
Considering she came from the gutter and only recently things have begun to pop off for her.
Sure.
I mean, her behaviors make sense, but
it does make sense, but it's starting to get a little like
feels very new money girl.
And then that poor girl who Mary is trying to set George up with, she wants to marry him.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a moment because basically Mary has George locked in a bedroom with her, like overnight.
Because the scandal will force the marriage.
Yeah. Right. And this poor girl is like, listen, I know how you are. Like, I would let you be you. Like, I would let you have your lovers and you would just have to give me a little sum now and then.
Break off a piece for me.
Yeah. And then she's trying to be funny with him and he laughs and she's like, see, I can be fun. And I feel bad for her. Like,
well, I mean, this sucks to be a woman, especially in this era. My God.
But yeah, George doesn't seem to be feeling her. And after they spend the night, we don't really get a sense of whether or not they're going to wed. I don't know the history of this historical figure. Does he marry her? Do we know?
George?
Yeah. Does George ever marry?
I haven't actually looked up anything factual about the Villiers. But I mean, I know the book that this is based on, again, I know we mentioned in our review for the first episode, is not a melodrama. It is factual, I believe. So, yeah. I'd be curious. I'll look up more, but
I was talking about the king's son also because he's mad that his dad is spending more time running around with George, and this is what he tells George, than like caring for his dying wife. because the queen looks bad. When we first see her this episode, she's like, there's blood coming from her nose. And then the rest of the episode, she's bedridden, kind of. Not like she can't get up, but she looks sick. So there's that. Oh my gosh, the execution of Sir Walter Raleigh. Because they didn't have a guillotine. They just have this
It's an axe.
With an axe. And I'm like, watch him miss. Like he doesn't make a clean cut. And sure enough, they show him miss twice. Like we see the axe hit his skull. Ugh, what a nightmare.
But yeah, that's why. I mean, the guillotine wasn't invented until 1789, and this is 1618. Yeah, that would be a handy dandy tool for during the French Revolution, clearly. But yeah, they didn't have that back then.
You know, I've always said if I have to be executed, I would love to go via guillotine.
Oh, okay. Well, that isn't going to happen.
I'm just putting that out there.
That's not going to happen now. California doesn't even have the death penalty, so you're going to have to go out of state to commit the kind of crime.
I'm going to have to go to Transylvania to get my proper execution. Is there anything else you'd like to say about episode 5?
Nope, but we're just zooming right through it.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.